All right, so welcome to the Peace Center. And the Peace Center is an initiative that's dear to my heart and started, when I started my academic career and my clinical career as a psychologist. And if you go to the beginning, Dr. Arguelles, to the
Oh,
first slide. Yeah, I think it just toggled a little too quick there.
I'm sorry. Let me go back. I think I'm going backwards. Okay, hold on. I'm stopping sharing for a minute. One second. I lost the presentation. My apologies. I'm not used to Zoom. So I don't know where the presentation went. I don't have the presentation. Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and perfect sort of segue to sometimes we need just to get a little bit into a peace mode and carry on. But the whole emphasis of it is obviously when you take the word literally, peace, but it also became an acronym. And initially was personal enrichment and community engagement. But as I started working deeper with this and looking at community engagement, we're now a global society, and the mission went further into the empowerment. So at the present, it is personal enrichment, and I'll talk about specifically how we engage students, what kind of activities, how we also assist them with academic success, as well as becoming a civic-minded student and global citizen. And one of the issues that I always talk about is that peace is possible. It is not a nebulous sort of ethereal. It is an actualized practice. What then becomes is it's not what we only think or feel, it actually gets done through action. It is how we behave. What do we do? The ultimate, of course, is in order to have that, particularly that inner peace, I would need to have an interaction of peace with another. And likewise, in order to have peace out there, is we would need all of us to engage and collaborate in that process. So when you look at the purpose and how is it implemented, it's a center, basically it became a venue, right? Where the focus was getting students involved, invite them to learn how to develop the inner peace. And that starts from mindfulness, emotional intelligence strategies and techniques. I'll talk about specifics in a little bit. I do a continuous series called Apps for Success. And APPS is an acronym for Applied Positive Psychology Strategies. And where they learn dealing with coping, perseverance, grit. One of the actually during this pandemic and the time of the protest, we did something ABC, which was adaptation, being resilient, and coping in a time of change. And so this would be engaging in them to build in that inner peace for them to have that endurance and stamina to continue and sustain academic success, as well as, again, engaging in community and ultimately collective empowerment movements. And so it's the strategy to create this harmonious, peaceful world, and where the skills are built for a better tomorrow in our community, nation, and ultimately, as I said, global citizenship. Okay. So as we proceed, you'll see that one of the sort of noble pursuits that we have, and also as we're blessed with the opportunity to be in pedagogy, right, is that education goes beyond passing knowledge. It actually becomes transformative. And so education, the way through the Peace Center and obviously in the classrooms, but what I promote and engage is to edu action, right? So what can you do? And this begins to take that further, what we look at the fourth R in education, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic, and then you get into relationship building. And so how do I relate to others? How do I maintain my authenticity? How do I maintain my inner strength, self-esteem, while being appreciative and connecting to others and having the empathy and ability to reflect and maintain that connection? And so it's basically the foundation for our human connection and how do we adjust in that social world. So next slide, please. You will see that how is it done? So there are numerous multidisciplinary connections. One of the more recent ones, so that way you could have an appreciation, we did peace building at the time of protest and pandemic. And we had a panel from the biology, from natural sciences, political sciences, law department, education department, nursing, and social sciences. And what we gave that lens of what's involved, and mathematics. In other words, we actually brought the students to appreciate how important and how connected we are. So there are numerous events and webinars that are carried out. Recently, I had also for the Diversity Month, a transgender advocate come about, not only talk about her story, but also the advocacy work that she does involving legislature and et cetera. Prior to that, also as part of the genocide awareness campaign, I had representatives from the Ukrainian embassy at Washington talk about the Holodomor genocide. We had Holocaust survivors. So there are numerous events that you could start seeing how it's all connected, in your classrooms and your activities and et cetera. And the Global Relationship Sustainability Series, these are more when we bring interfaith dialogues. We bring different political aspects, obviously this year we had a number of presentations regarding the election. One of the projects that you see there where it talks about age and community, I'm going to let Dr. Arguelles tell you more in depth how we actually built into a larger initiative. There's also undergraduate research that's involved, which deals with community needs assessment. The other aspect is that all the students, they are doing three components to it, which means awareness, advocacy, and action. This is also connects to the service learning. Similarly, when there are things such as maybe a film, we could, especially so in a sort of a silver lining way, looking at that other students could join in from another class and watch a film like we did with Iron Jawed Angels, which was dealing with human sexuality, gender roles. Political, it was dealing with the amendment for the rights for women to vote. And so we combined it. We had a criminal justice, forensic psychology, abnormal psychology, looking at COVID in the prison population, right? Dealing with mental health. So you see the integration, how it's all put together, and then students do reflection or they engage in civic action activity. Next slide. So it was a little bit easier to do in a way, but we still maintained this theme experience. And when I say it was a little bit easier, basically there were activities that were done at the actual location by the student life. There's a multi-purpose room that is known as the Peace Center. And we had them, if you kind of maybe notice, I kind of think in acronyms or a certain way of mnemonics to help me remember. And you have various days with different focus. So Mondays was Motivational Monday, and students would have motivational discussion circles. They would engage in any activity that they want to share, or any reading that they would do, or even if we had a specific webinar. At the same time, we alternated between meditation and mindfulness practices. On Tuesday, there would be learning specific techniques such as overcoming procrastination, establishing time management, time mastery routine. It was almost more of a life coach perspective. Wednesday was very open, and students would come in and learn about it. There's some peace ambassadors. They're also connected to the change makers that are part of our college work in connection with Ashoka. On Thursday, it would be more of transformative, or it would be engaged in something of transformational experiences and practice that go beyond very concrete static modalities in learning. But it would be enhancing in the personal enrichment development and learning how to start a type of social movement and what's needed. And Fridays were, many of them just would share poetry. There would be videos, there would be playing games. But when I say playing games, it would be more of a relationship building. Okay, next slide, please. And so what you basically see is now that the overview of all these activities that are done, and all these sub programs that, if you will. And just so you know that one of the things we were looking at, when it also comes to issues of funding and everything, it is similarly based on something that Valencia College has had with the Peace Institute and Justice. There are ways also to get grants for those programs, and which is what we've been working on. We've been also looking at peace building course designation for students. There are different courses we're exploring, modules. This now also becomes, when it's a workforce ready, that you could get into for students, non-traditional, maybe adults in the industry that want to pursue or enhance or develop their skills further. That could be with Department of Children and Families and hospitality, anyone in the criminal justice. Obviously with mental health addiction, there are particular that personal enrichment techniques and strategy that they learn. And we have also, very interesting, if you look, because it's multidisciplinary, there are ways that connecting, and each one of the sort of these disciplines has their own perspective of what they could bring in, and then we unite. So you could, for example, have something, and we also connected to what are known as the SDGs, Social Sustainability Development Goals, which would be, for example, if you look at world hunger or zero hunger, you would say, okay, we would have a nutritionist, we would have someone from humanities, and then you would have somebody from education. Do a lot of work with human rights. We would have, for example, when you look at something as nuclear warfare, proliferation, what would be how can students be involved, be familiar with, and we could have them bring that in from the perspective of the humanities. Education also, of course, I bring in the social psychology lens, but then we also have an event once a year that's called Arts for Human Rights, which is the display of artists, spoken word, visual art, performing arts, addressing music, films, visual arts, addressing human rights issues. For example, recently we watched a Hidden Life film by about one of the earliest documented resistors of the Third Reich movement. Next slide, please. So I know for the brevity of time, these are basically usually the quotes that, as I encourage students, faculty, and administrators who are involved, that this is an important contributor to actually uniting all of the disciplines and ultimately making the shift and the change, and encouraging the students. So I'm not gonna, as we said, it's recorded. You could see the slides, but I usually start with, when people say this is difficult endeavor, and I'm reminded of the Emerson quote, and just to paraphrase it, that, what we are able to actually do, what's within us internally, is insurmountable to what lies behind us or in front of us. So a lot of it is the limitation we set. And I conclude with, with Gandhi's quote usually is, we want to change. We all could unite on it. Then let's start being it from ourselves. I appreciate it. The next slide gives you my information. I'm always available. Email me, telephone, and any collaboration. We're always open and, very passionate and interested. Thank you for your time. And as we said, we'll be available for Q&A as we continue. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody, and my apologies for the technical difficulties. I am not very technology savvy when it comes to Zoom. I just wanted to say that I am so happy to be here. I was at this meeting many years ago, speaking about older adults and retirement and some of the benefits. So I want to thank Ms. Curtis for that invitation back then, and this is amazing to be here. One of my passions, talking about passion and the fact that we do enjoy teaching, and through the teaching we want to make sure that we transform lives. We also want to transmit those passions that we may have in terms of our research and other things that we engage into our discipline or other similar disciplines. Next. So in my particular work, I find that since March until now, I have had a lot of opportunities to really listen to my students and students in general, because I do advise both the West Campus Psychology Club and the West Campus Psych Beta, which is the community college Psychology Honor Society at a national level. So I do listen to my students. They don't have to be psychology students necessarily, but in general, what are their fears, what are their concerns, and specifically what might be their interests beyond their degrees that they're taking or completing at the college. So one of the first concerns of mine at the beginning of the pandemic, and we were really struggling with two pandemics, the COVID-19 and also the racial injustice, was academics. We wanted to make sure, at least in my classes, that we covered academics, that our students were involved in reading not only their textbooks or the materials that we were given in the classroom, but also outside, that they were well informed and engaged. And one of the best ways to do it, teaching psychology and having been a researcher for many years, was to engage them in research. So I started presenting different ways for them to learn about, how to read an article, how to digest it, how to massage it, how to really get into it and say, I'm gonna take a dive in and just concentrate on not their global topic, but exactly what it is that I'm passionate about, that I wanna pursue. I also connected that with service learning. I ask my students always to engage in service learning as a priority, but I don't require it. I am all about students choosing what they really want to pursue further, what they might be passionate about. So I give them choices of different alternatives, including service learning. And a lot of my students choose also the agencies themselves. The next thing that I really wanted them to engage was to incorporate that extracurricular and co-curricular experience, even though we were working remotely. So I not only spoke about the Psychology Club and the Psychology Honor Society, but I introduced them to other, student organizations. And if there was something posted on ChartNet, which is where we post all the student activities, I pointed out to them that it was there and that it was an opportunity for them to grow. And last but not least, the Change Making Initiative, next, which is a college-wide initiative. We are an Ashoka designated site. And I wanted to make sure that our students knew that making changes also require growth from within, getting informed, becoming more resilient, action-oriented, etc. So one of the topics that I thought would be very important to cover, because of the pandemic and the issues that were being discussed about injustice, was the issue of health disparities. I personally came to know about this topic many, many years ago. I can tell you probably in the early 90s, when I read a lot of the literature on nursing and the literature that had to do with HIV and how minority populations were contracting HIV much more faster, and they were going from HIV positive cases to AIDS in a very rapid pace. So first in the 80s, then in the 90s, I had heard a lot about health disparities, but like I said, from the more, what can we do for preventive medicine? So this time I wanted to go into my discipline and see what my discipline had to offer. So not only do they offer a definition that basically says that health disparities, or when one group is, systematically, unjustly being provided different maybe opportunities for health or preventive medicine or insurance or access. The other thing too is education about those illnesses and about those disorders. So I was looking at the pandemic, and again, those flashes were coming back about the HIV epidemic. And I remember that consistently, one of the things that I was very conscious about as an early researcher back then as an undergraduate student was that those materials that were delivered had to be sensitive to the communities that we were trying to reach out. Sometimes it was a linguistic sensitivity, sometimes a sexual orientation sensitivity, sometimes just race or nationality. So we wanted to get to the core of how to best, transmit the message. So thinking about that and thinking about the fact that during this specific pandemic, we also have the disparity where some individuals are very lucky, like we are right now. We have a stable job. We can work remotely. We have access to, a lot of those opportunities. A lot of our minority communities do not have access to that. And they are the ones that make the deliveries for the grocery stores, that work very long hours, maybe in fast food restaurants and the like. So they get more exposed to the COVID-19 or other viruses or things that might be, happening. So in light of that, I had consistently been doing research funded by the School of Science on bilingualism and executive functioning at the West Campus, but my research required that the students tested face-to-face someone, so I could no longer pursue that research. But opportunities do come, and I had the opportunity next to collaborate with two colleagues from the chemistry faculty, Dr. Monzon and Professor Sanchez. They were thinking about how about looking at vaping, because vaping and using of e-cigarettes, etc., is also something that affects a lot of our minority communities. Sometimes they are more exposed to anxiety, stress, other things that might be, picking up on vaping as, a self-monitoring or a coping mechanism. So they wanted to know just in general, what is the use of vaping in the college population. And the second layer to this, and very importantly, is to know that our students also were eager to learn, eager to get involved in research. So when Dr. Monzon and Professor Sanchez spoke with me about probably, putting together a project on vaping, I immediately said yes, and we started to work. So we had about 18 students very committed during the summer. We started doing IRB, everything, putting it together. And the students not only put together a survey questionnaire, we put it in Qualtrics. The students started getting, some information. They started reading articles, getting familiarized with the different facets of that specific area of research. So we met on a weekly basis twice. We met as a big group, the 18 students, and then we met in smaller groups. I was supervising directly for students that were very interested in pursuing more information, in knowing about mental health issues related to vaping. The end result of that summer project, it went from a little bit of the spring into the summer session and then culminated, and we are continuing to work together on this project. Next, and you cannot really see this really well, but I just wanted to illustrate that there was an outcome to this project. That is, one of my students had a poster at the School of Science virtual symposium. that was conducted in September. So they always work on research with the outcome of either a paper or a poster that will be showcased either at the School of Science STEM Symposium or at other opportunities, like, for example, the Interdisciplinary Symposium in the Hialeah campus, or the Life Sciences of South Florida Symposium that is usually held in one of the partner colleges or universities. So this was one of the products, is just to showcase. Next. Um, that was one of the summer projects, but going back again to opportunities and passion. My passion since 1989 has really been in working with older adults. In fact, I didn't know what to study when I went to college. I started with chemistry, but my passion was really to somehow build jobs for older population. So I ended up studying that, and I started, working in gerontology. I started doing research in a center on aging, now called Neuroscience Center. And the fact of the matter is that it's a necessity. 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 and over in the next decade. And America is rapidly aging. In fact, Florida is considered to be one of the oldest states in the nation. And globally, we are also aging. So why study aging? Why getting involved in the research? Not only are we getting older as a population, but we are aging in place and we are living longer. So that also brings question of happiness, work-related issues, training, etc. Next. So having that said, one of the things that I am very concerned about is caregivers. Caregivers and how we can support them. Caregivers, obviously family members of patients now at the moment that are suffering from COVID, that might be older Americans, frail health, etc. But also at the same time, that after the pandemic, it's going to be more difficult, that older Americans will be back to being employed. Our young population is getting displaced, doesn't have a job. They also can become ill because of frail health, but they have a better chance to going back to the workforce than someone, for example, 40 and over. Because as Age Discrimination Act says, there is discrimination that happens after age 40. So thinking of that, it had been my dream for many years to start something at the college where we could really connect in a deeper way, not only our research, but also our community work. So I started in the summer with the Humanities Edge. I participated in that project as a faculty member, and I received some training and support. And I started, talking about perhaps a needs assessment to see what our older Americans around, the vicinity of our campuses might need. And then in conversations with Dr. Velocon, we realized that we had a lot in common in terms of our interests and our training in neuroscience and neuropsych, and specifically in my case, a little bit on human factors and aging. So it's not by default that I'm not really that technology savvy. I haven't studied that, and there's a lot of training that needs to go into that, a specific way of training an older individual. So we started with this Age Awareness Initiative that does provide to the students the opportunity to not only do community service, but also do research and do a little bit of writing as well. We are really outreaching to the community. We are remotely connecting to adult daycares, remotely connecting to senior centers. Some of the students on their own, they have found placements that are not remote, but the ones that we have connected them with are all remote to make sure that we're safe. There's a lot of need not only for the seniors that are affected by this, but like I said, for their caregivers and also for the caretakers, those individuals that provide care for them. The nurses, the CNAs, the certified nurse assistants, the individuals that really provide the daily care. A lot of them are now at home because they cannot attend the adult daycare. So their family members are undergoing a lot of stress. And we are trying to help as much as possible by connecting through service learning with those community service agencies. But Dr. Velocon and I are also training the students because speaking to an older adult and the caregivers is a little bit different than speaking to their fellow students, to their peers, or to somebody that might be younger. Next. So one of the things that I am also doing is I'm mentoring a student through the Humanities Edge, and she's developing an age sensitivity training that could be used, in a corporation or in an organization that may want to make sure that they understand what does it mean when you say ageism. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's a double jeopardy. There's genderism and ageism. There's racism and ageism. There's sexism and ageism. And right now, there is health-related concerns and ageism, because the assumption is that only older Americans are getting ill to COVID-19 and only they can fall, victims of, the disease and pass. And that is not necessarily the case. So we have to do a lot of education so that these stereotypes don't continue to grow. So next. So I always want to, showcase, I guess, a person that everybody admires, that everybody can think of when they think of a concept or a construct that I want to present. And in this case, is somebody that has really combated ageism, that is bigger than anybody out there that we know. And it was the Supreme Court Justice, RBG. In her life, she not only combated ageism, but she combated sexism and a lot of the other, social injustices. And in her own life, she was a victim, but she was able to fight back and do extremely well when, at times she was asked to maybe, step down and not continue to be a judge. When it was her time, she went on her own, but not before. And that was one of the messages that I think our students needed to understand, that there's healthy aging, there's opportunities for the future next. And some of those opportunities are really to become more of a change maker, to really feel like you are empowered, to become more empathic, not only about things that you are living yourself, but that are about things that you might not understand for many more years to come. Is trying to walk in the other person's shoes, in this case, an older person's shoes. Reflect on those service learning opportunities, take action. We are encouraging the students to advocate for older Americans, to really get, into that thought process of what are really the things that impact them that I can make a difference on. If it's food insecurity, what can I really do? What is the next step that I should take? Is it through research? Is it through community service? Is it writing a letter to a legislator? And also, learning to be resilient, because a lot of us are undergoing a lot of stress at this point, and a lot of things that are not common. It's not the status quo, but we need to go forward, and we will do better after these two pandemics are over. Next. So those are just some references, and the next slide is just my contact information. Next. I am very happy to be here and to continue the conversation. Aging is my passion, and as a researcher and an educator, I do hope to inspire, the future generation, which is already in training for the future. America is aging. Globally, we are getting older as well. So we want to make sure that we have workforce readiness to serve that population. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arguelles and Dr. Belacon. So now we're going to have some time before we end our webinar for some Q&A. You can either activate your mic if you are able to, or just write it in the chat. And if you write in the chat, then I can read it aloud for everyone to hear if you're not able to actually unmute yourself.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Roberta Rowland. I'm from College of Central Florida, and I teach in the nursing department. And this was a very exciting topic to come up, because resilience actually came up when we were interviewing our capstone students that were leaving the program. And what they're finding is, this is nursing. So what we're finding is that you made a good point about our workforce needs to be prepared to serve the populations. But, you know, in order to be able to help someone, you have to have resilience yourself. And that was a topic that was coming up, was especially during the pandemic and everything that's been going on with nursing, is how to help them get through this so that they can be caregivers. You have to take care of yourself. So resilience, you were saying about preparing the populations to come to take care of our society. What have you looked into the resilience of the caregiver?
Actually, in my previous, employment, I did a lot of research with caregivers, Alzheimer's caregivers, HIV, oncology, and spinal cord, all their caregivers. So we looked at the fact that caregivers have a lot of burden, have a lot of things, guilt, all of that. And it was not until they actually reached out to get help, either mental health or support groups, or help with, believe it or not, technology. We did a lot of research with technology, how they could connect, how they could take care of themselves through leisure activities, just to give themselves a chance, support groups, respite care. So yes, we did look at it. We haven't looked at that yet with the students, but that is something that some of them are very interested in. We're just beginning the research at MDC in this particular with this particular population, but it's something that if I could recommend some of the literature, there's work by Dr. Mitrani, Dr. Lowenstein, Dr. Sarah Sasha, and I'll be happy if you email me to forward you some of that literature, because caregivers do need a little bit of assistance with that, and specifically that it be done in a very culturally sensitive manner. Because even who do we acknowledge as our family members might change as a result of our culture. And I don't know if Dr. Velocon would like to add to that, but that's where we are right now. Thank you for your question.
One of the things we're actually, so when we do these apps for success, is there are training of the resiliency building tools. And some of the components are, as I mentioned, what are the techniques they could engage in practice for coping, emotional intelligence or EQ raising, developing courage, reminding themselves of the successes they've encountered. And so it's interesting, particularly when you bring up the nursing, is that their passion and their drive could be the catalyst and the strength to endure, to connect. And so there are actually protocols, and it's interesting. We spoke about this with Dr. Arguelles, that the teaching in specifically what are known as the attributes of the change maker, and which are, for now we're using the 4, which is the resiliency, action, empathy, and action. So that there are modules that actually address resiliency specific training. I could also recommend looking at the University of UPenn. They actually have a positive psychology, whereas Seligman's work related to, and it's geared toward student, lawyers, medical professionals, and you could tailor it to your needs. Yes.
I have a question. Dr. Ailes from Pasco Nano State College, director of the Success Academy, where we spoke underrepresented
I think you're breaking. Can you repeat that question again, please, Dr. Theodore?
Particularly Black, Native American women, disabled, and presenters. I'm breaking up. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You were breaking in and out.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What remedy do you have for students who are having difficulty because of the curriculum is not culturally responsive. They are not seeing themselves in that that they are being taught. What type of remedy do you have for them, those students that are struggling with that?
If I may just suggest, I give my students, in my case, a lot of freedom as to the research that they would like to write about, or the service learning opportunities that they would like to pursue. I also bring a lot of examples about researchers, specifically, for example, in psychology. We don't have a lot of researchers that are members of minority. So when you have someone that is really well known, I always highlight your research in the class. I also tell the students what are some of the issues or needs in the community that you live in that might be of interest to you. For example, I might have a student that maybe is a linguistic minority. And how do you communicate to your grandparents? How do you communicate to other individuals in their surroundings? There has to be either a research article or an opportunity. There are adult daycares, for example, that serve very specialized populations, not only because of linguistic minorities, but populations that, for example, might have been, victims of war, or that might be veterans, etc. So if a specific student has a need, I try my very best to guide them so that they find where will be the best placement for them, where will be the best research that may want to write about. Because I want to make sure that everybody has a voice. And especially in our discipline and in most of the social sciences, finding your own voice might at times be difficult, but it's very doable. So it's a matter of being passionate about what you want to pursue, and then you can make a change. So we offer a lot of opportunities. The curriculum itself, there's the learning outcomes that really provide for that holistic approach to education. At least, at Miami-Dade College, there are opportunities to really make it happen. And not only inside the classroom, but with the curricular and co-curricular activities. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. That is right on point there. Absolutely. And Dr. Eric, I also like the idea of what you said before of bringing all of the disciplines together. How would that work in helping this?
Well, so right,
see
so
themselves in the curriculum?
So I would love for us to, to have one of those interactive group dynamic focus groups, if you will. So I'll give you a very interesting one. My class, particularly social psychology, but in everything, day one, I start with what is diversity? And people will usually refer to what are external. And I start with, well, what about socioeconomic status? You can't see that from the start. What about intersectionality of having skin color mixed in with a culture? So for example, an African American is not really the same in Dominican Republic as somebody from Bahamas and then somebody from Miami. And then we go, well, what about your sexual orientation? And then I say, so how many are nursing students? And I mean, it's usually, since my background is actually in neuroscience. And I'll say, well, we talk about skin conditions. And you will see many pictures of a white skin with red blemishes. Have any of you ever thought about what is being a dermatologist with a completely different skin patient, client? How does that represent when I lived in a small town, rural area, how I grew up? Have you considered metropolitan area? So that idea of diversity of thinking, or talking actually in our population recently with, with the election, how do you talk to someone who's an older person who came from Cuba, and when you say anything that remotely reminds them of, without being political, of a certain political leaning, that they get frightened? Do we need to understand them? And so now you bring in a political science major. to wear a mask or not to wear a mask. We actually had that as one of our discussions. And I had somebody from biology who explained the viral load, how it's transferred. We had the political, is it you're right or not? And then I bring in, well, what is your attitude as a social psychologist? And then how do we educate was brought in by a person from the School of Education. So we need to start thinking in those terms and break the silos if we are ever to engage and connect to students.
I love it. Thank you. And Henry Ailes, not Eric Theodore's name. Sorry.
Sorry, we missed the last part again.
I'm Dr. Ailes, not Eric Theodore. I'm just signed in under Eric's name.
Got it. Thank you for your question. We have about 7 to 8 more minutes, so feel free to either activate your mic or write your question in the chat.
If I may add something in the meantime, I want to say that there's also games or dynamics that one can have in the classroom. There is, for example, a diversity bingo. There is a mosaic of diversity game where you can actually play that with the students, and they can find that there's a lot of communality, even though they might at first sight, think of themselves as being different from one another because of the surname or what have you. So that is a way also of building community in the groups, and that can be done remotely as well, where the students can connect in a smaller groups. They can break down into groups. We use Blackboard Ultra Collaborate, and it's very easy to do. I'm sure you can do that in Zoom as well. And it does lead itself to a lot of conversations, but the students really come out with great questions. Another thing that the Psychology Club, the Psychology Honor Society did as well is that we hosted virtual conversations with experts. So the first one we brought in a student in a doctoral program of a school psychology that not only spoke about a school psychology, but about the need of, the students we're having in K through 12. So that kind of brought it back to, what was happening in the pandemic, but also in the context of the discipline. Then we had an industrial psychologist that is an expert on assessment centers that works specifically with assessment centers with a police academy. So that also brought in another side to the conversation. So we want to make sure that our students, again, have that holistic education, that they're learning, that they're pursuing their passions, and at the same time that they know that they can make a difference. Because doing research in the social sciences, at least in our discipline, we know that is so important. So that, all the guidelines and the things that will come up in the future, we do research on. So to illustrate the point, and I know that those of you in nursing and healthcare would appreciate a nurse educator can teach somebody how to properly wear a mask. It's not like this, right? It's like this. But how can you be culturally sensitive, for example, to tell somebody that may not be understanding you linguistically or cognitively? We have older adults that might have mild cognitive impairment. So it's not telling them, it's showing them, it's modeling that behavior. So that goes for everybody, not just nursing, but it's just to illustrate the point of so many facets to the same question. So we're really having our students think outside the box so that they can be the action-oriented catalyst that we need for the future, especially for those future jobs that will be there after the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arguelles. And Dr. Bellicon, any final thoughts?
Well, just to be brief, but the importance of language, as I was just mentioning, it's interesting. My dissertation was on bilingualism, and it becomes very critical for both in understanding and expressing. So many times, something simple in South Florida that I've encountered is the word assertive. and it is not understood. There is no word assertive in Spanish. Okay, asertivo and all that, that's Spanglish. Why is that becoming important? So when you're communicating to someone and you're saying, why are you so emotional? Why are you so passive and aggressive? That becomes the distinction in responding to a treatment plan, compliance, work performance, etc. And the other one, to just to end with this, I encourage everyone, if you haven't seen it, to share with your students and colleagues a short TED talk. It's called Take the Other to Lunch. And it's really when we learn about the other culture that we don't understand and realize, and something as basic when, I could just tell you of my background. When people ask me, why do you eat with your hands? You're educated. I grew up in Uzbekistan. And the simple question was, well, why do you eat French fries and hamburgers with your hands? And then when you complete that, there's an activity. It's called the Ugly Oranges Problem. So I know the time is running, but the issue is this. There are two people that are told they need to buy an orange. What they don't both realize, those two teams, one needs for medication cure and one needs with the juice, and the other one needs the peel to produce a certain type of material. Both of them are not realizing, and they're fighting and competing and doing different things. And from that, what you realize at the end, that they learn and they go, my God, we should have worked together. And I see how you were trying to make the deal for the peel. You had an interesting way of looking at it, which is, again, going back to diversity, equity, inclusivity. And they all realize, why did we not even see that from the beginning? And so it was literally ends up win-win, because you don't need to divide the orange. You just take the different parts of it. And that would be my conclusion for.
Thank you, Dr. Bellicon, and thank you everyone for having participated in this webinar, which, by the way, it will become available to you via a link that it will be sent to you by AFC. You feel free to contact us for any further discussion. I just put our information right on the chat, but also will be available via the link that you will send. Thank you to our presenters, Dr. Bellicon and Dr. Arguelles. And please be safe. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you all. Hey.